All right, there we go. So welcome everybody, and we are recording this, so they'll be able to give you the recording link and also send you the slides. I do have a list of folks who signed up on LMS, and I'll use that to send those out. So if you didn't sign up for some reason on LMS, that's fine. You're all are welcome. But let me know in the chat, and I'll make sure you get on that list. And also, as we go through this, please feel free to ask any questions. I think we're small enough where you can do that. Just unmute yourself, or you can certainly use the chat as well. I'll keep an eye on that. And as I said, today we're covering a lot. It's connection, compassion, and self-compassion, kind of in the spirit of February being Heart Month and Valentine's Day, and come across some pretty interesting information about how important all these topics are to our actual physical health. But also, let me just say, there is my contact information there. If you want to reach out to me at all for any reason, please feel free to do that. I'm in the book, so to speak, and you can call me as well. And there's the EAP, well, our Employee and Family Resources phone number and web address. I like to start this way, so just kind of helping us. You probably had a busy morning, and there may be a lot on your mind, and maybe there's some emotional stuff going on, and maybe in the body. So it's always helpful to do a quick pause kind of practice just to bring us into the present moment. So let's do one. And all we're really going to do is pay attention to our breath. You can close your eyes for this if you want, but you don't have to. Pay attention to your breath, breathing in, breathing out, maybe lengthening the in-breath and lengthening the out-breath even longer. Letting the body settle in as you continue breathing, being kind to the body. So make yourself comfortable and relaxed as we do this. And we could do sort of what I sometimes call 3 breaths for you, or for a pause. One breath is just to breathe in and just feel the breath itself. What does it feel like? Pay attention to the full in and out breath. Second breath is breathing in, pay attention to the body. How's the body doing? What does the body need? And the third breath is pay attention to yourself and what you need, and being kind to yourself. So sending yourself kind of a pat on the back and a little sense of appreciation for the good work that you do. Remember to be kind to yourself and make yourself a priority. Take care of yourself. And so that's a quick pause. You can open your eyes if they've been closed, but that's important to remember to take care of our body and our mind, and be kind to ourselves. And with that, I'll say, if this is your lunchtime, please feel free to eat. Of course, you may need to do that. No problem. We will do a couple of exercises. So, when we get to those, I'll explain that a little bit. We will, the other thing I would just say is, part of the reason I do that quick pause in the beginning is just to say, let's try to keep focused. I mean, I realize it's tempting to do other stuff and multitask. We do that all day long. But a lot of this is all about single tasking, and try to just stay with what's in front of us. That's right. That's a mindful practice, right? So just stay with what's right here. Today, with the mini lesson, kindliness towards ourselves and others, an essential ingredient, kind of merges mindfulness and kindliness into kindfulness. Good way to kind of succinctly look at it. But the premise for today is, we've all know about the guidelines about how to be physically healthy, eating well, exercising, washing your hands, plenty of rest, all of that good stuff. So we're not going to really cover any of that, but there is quite a link. So how many of us have thought seriously about our social lives or our social health? You probably have, and maybe that's why you're here. But the strength of our relationships and our sense of belonging in a community is key to staying healthy, right? I don't think anybody could argue with that. And that's really what we're kind of exploring today. So we're going to start with this. This is from Dr. Robert Waldinger, who's the director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. So the quote is two parts. I do small actions day to day that keep me connected with other people. I didn't used to, but then my research began to show people who do are happier, live longer, and stay healthier. And I started deliberately making dates with friends, going out to dinner with other guys, have a Friday noon meeting every week with my friend and colleague Mark, and I make small, frequent contact with other people I want to stay connected to. And texting counts. Although we'll address that too, because it's not always the best way to really get a good, strong connection. And people do it all the time, of course. But this is pretty interesting, coming from a guy who is the oversees this long study, which I'm going to go into, as I said, in a minute. So I came across this. This is from the Greater Good Science Center. Also, and you might want the slides because you might want to look at some of this stuff. This is from a podcast from the Science of Happiness, and there's actually a number of podcast episodes that did this whole month on connection and compassion. So if you really want to look into this further, if you just go into the link, that'll take you to their podcast. But if you look at other episodes, you'll see other really interesting, fascinating. It's all research based, and they just do a lot of good stuff in general. And the Science of Happiness is real quick. It's like 15-20 minutes, hosted by Dacher Keltner. And but this one is particularly interesting, I thought, for this topic. And it's based on the work. So how 7 days can transform your relationship with another person. And it's based on the work of John Gottman and Julie Gottman. If you've heard of them, they're researchers in what strengthens long-term relationships. And so they talk in the podcast, they actually use a couple that they talked to and had them go through the 7 days. And each day has a particular focus. So John Gottman, I think they really worked with marriage and family therapists in doing that. They do a lot of pretty amazing research. So they did research that looked at both what he calls the masters and disasters of relationships, and empirically found what makes relationships work. And so they share their journey on navigating communication, intimacy, and the stresses of caregiving while rediscovering a connection through this 7-day love prescription. And it is kind of prescriptive. Sometimes we need that. Long-term relationships kind of do take some work, and they can kind of get stale, and it's easy to kind of get into a rut. So there are some practices that you might want to try. So day one is the 10-minute check-in. And we probably already do this with our loved ones, but it's easy to get kind of carried away and wrapped up into daily life, right? So with all the tasks and challenges that we're going through, so sometimes we don't always check in a meaningful way, or we forget to check in altogether. And that's really what day one is to make sure that you check in, you kind of pause, and you mindfully check in with each other about, what's going on, what do you, kind of what is more important, what, and really kind of not just the superficial stuff. We do that all the time, but maybe going a little bit deeper, like, what do you need from me today? And when you talk about this in the check-in, how are you feeling this morning? Those kinds of questions. We don't really kind of get into that next level of depth, right? So it's kind of checking in with the whole person. Day two is to ask a big question, and usually it's an open-ended question. It might be something about, where do you see your career going in the next couple of years, or where do you actually maybe talking about the relationship itself? What's important to us in our relationship, and what kinds of things do we want to work on, or what do we want to do in the next year? Those kinds of bigger questions. They talk about this with this particular couple, and the woman in the relationship, as is very common, is taking care of her elderly father. And so, the big question for them was, what happens after your father passes away? What's our plan? What's important to us? So asking a big question, that's day two. Day three is expressing gratitude and saying thank you to the other person, but again, in a meaningful, maybe deeper level. So they try to really take some time to do that and say what they really appreciate about the other person. Day four is about compliments, and in the same vein, it's it's kind of hard to do sometimes because we sort of get into the trap of being more critical with our partners. That's many of us can relate to that probably. After a long period of time, we know everybody's kind of faults and weaknesses, but we also know their strengths, and so it's about intentionally focusing on the positive side, and taking some time to compliment your partner about maybe what's going on in the relationship. And again, for just to give an example, this couple that they interviewed, the wife talked about how she was appreciative of her husband also taking care of her father and treating him kindly and compassionately, and really being good son-in-law to him. So let's see, what's day five is to ask for what you need. And that can be hard too, is to identify what you need. And it's not just like what you need, what are we having for dinner, or what you need time wise, but it's what you need as a person. So it's not, hey, I need you to do this task for me. But it might be something. Then again, in the example, it was, I'm feeling lonely and I like to be snuggled. I like some touch, that kind of a thing. So it's maybe more on a feeling level. What do you need from the other person? And day six is about practicing mini touch. So apparently they've done a lot of research on touch, and just even simple little snuggling, high fives, hugs, embraces, those kinds of things are very important and fundamental to connection. So, and the science really proves that out. It lowers cortisol, it elevates the oxytocin levels, can stimulate the vagus nerve, and helps with your stress. So, lot of benefits from simple, small touches. So that's day six. Day seven is what he calls the sacred date night. And so, trying to come up with something a little bit new where it's just the two of you spending time together, not distracted by all the craziness of the world around us, all the stuff that comes across on our phones that we're constantly in touch with, but just really taking that time. And it doesn't have to be something expensive. It can be going out for ice cream, or it can be, going out and doing something special together. So those are the 7 days. And I encourage you, you might want to take a look at this if you want to listen to the whole podcast. And then if you see on the bottom here, this Join the Science of Happiness podcast 7-day love challenge, which is also put together by Julie and John Gottman. And there's a link here where you can sign up. And it's a challenge to go through this. So you can actually, kind of get a guided practice to do that. So before I get into this, just want to pause and just see how people are doing. Does that make sense? I'm not sure what you thought of when you were kind of signing up for this, but what is it? Is there anything else? I mean, I'll talk about a few other things, but does that help right off the bat, that kind of information? Any feedback or any questions that you might have? All right, well, continuing on. So that Dr. Waldinger that I referenced before that quote is the current director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development, which is the longest longitudinal study on health and happiness, and started back in 1938. And so they're basically looking at what makes for a good life. What are the ingredients that we need to make life good and purposeful and long lasting and healthy. And it was interesting. They looked at all those different dimensions. And so what do you think was the number one factor? Do you have any guesses here? Anybody want to guess what the number one factor is? Probably not too difficult because knowing the topic of today's session, but it is good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. That was the most dominant number one factor. And they studied thousands of people from all different backgrounds. And as you can see, they studied people for a long period of time. And they correlated that with their longevity. So it's good relationships. Now, 3 lessons that they learned. 1, social connections are really good for us, and that loneliness kills. And so we might know people these days, it's easy to kind of get isolated, and being lonely is a very tough situation. So being in connection with people is really important. Not just the number of friends you have, and it's not whether you're in a committed relationship, but it's the quality of your close relationships that really matters. So what I already presented, I think, is important. What can you do to kind of improve the quality of those relationships? And the third thing they found, which I think is fascinating, is good relationships don't just protect our bodies, but they protect our brains. They make us healthier in brain fitness. And I think that's, really, really crucial. So there's a link here. There we go. There's a lot of stuff on this. There's books and there's things on YouTube, and it's been referenced in podcasts, but this one link takes you to a relatively, it's not too long. It's maybe 15, 20 minutes, if I recall correctly, YouTube, where they kind of go over all that. So if you want to look into that a little further, there's the link there. But as we all know, distraction, and we live in a very information-filled and kind of distracted world, distraction equals disconnection. Just look at this Dilbert cartoon. Dilbert is talking to his coworker here. Studies say people are losing their ability to focus because of all the digital distractions. Now, the other fella here, Wally, I think his name is holding his phone and a cup of coffee, and he's not paying attention. So he goes, "Sorry, what?" And then Dilbert gets a beep or a notification on his phone. He goes, "Hold on." And he pulls his phone out in the final panel here. And the other guy is like, what were you saying? And he's like, I don't know, probably wasn't important. He probably even forgot what it was. But it just kind of illustrates the way that the information overload that we have really can disrupt and disconnect us. So I just put in the bottom here, we spend so much of our lives online, and think about what it's been like since the pandemic. So that you add that digital world, and even today's session, for example, we used to do these in person, and I can't really see you all. I can pull up your the the participants, but many of you are even not on video. That's okay. You don't have to be it if you feel more comfortable just staying that way. That's fine. But I have no way to kind of read the body language or how you might be taking in some of this stuff. That's why I want to pause and ask, how's this going for you? So, but with that plus social media, a lot of us rely on that. It's kind of a recipe for disaster. So even though they're convenient, the flip side is it lacks the depth and richness that comes from physically spending time together. So I'm not saying that the online world and the virtual world, I mean, look, we're even doing virtual therapy for people. And a lot of people prefer that. It has a lot of upside. But I think we need to look at how to rebalance that so that we're making sure that we take care of it and we're getting some of that depth and richness that comes from physically spending time together. So there has been some research done on this, how relationships affect your health, again from the Greater Good magazine. So that's an active link. And Cassie Killam, author of the book The Art and Science of Connection, argues that social health matters as much as to our well-being as mental and physical health, and in fact is interrelated to each and necessary for keeping us fit. What's meant by social health? Well, for her, it refers to a deeper connection, mutual support, and a good relationship with yourself. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and having the support you need and feel cared for, understood, valued, and like you belong. And I think we all know this intuitively, right? But there is definite research that backs this up. Now, some guidelines on improving social health. One, so stretch if the quantity is low. So if you're not getting enough physical contact, for example, with folks, being together physically, stretch a little bit, reach out, try to connect with somebody. Two is rest if the quantity is high. So some people have a lot, real too much. Maybe your work involves working with people all the time, face to face. And maybe you have a lot going on in your personal and family lives. So you might need to rest and create some boundaries. Increase closeness if the quality is low. So again, if you're, like working at home a lot, for example, and you're doing a lot of virtual meetings and that sort of thing, you might need to increase the closeness and the types of connections that you have. And then flex if the quality is high. So again, if the quality of your interactions and your social connections is high, that's great, but you may need to put some boundaries around that. So just some tips. One study found that both introverts and extroverts benefited in their daily lives from having more frequent and deeper connections with other people, even though you might not expect that for introverts. But it's kind of interesting. They found that even for introverts, that even having brief chats like in the grocery store line or at Starbucks or something like that, chatting up somebody else for a few seconds and talking about the weather, even, what's going on with some of those kinds of things, that can really help us feel, even those small things can help us feel a little more connected. So they even came up the Canadian researchers came up with some numeric guidelines. If you want to look into that, there is an active link there. But Killam, that same author, came up with this. It does sound quite kind of prescriptive and maybe a little bit kind of cut and dry, but it may be something to try. First, connect with 5 different people every week. Second, maintain at least 3 close relationships in general. And third, dedicate at least 1 hour each day to social interaction. So try to make sure that part of your day has that essential ingredient. And this is something else I came up with from the New York Times. The link is down here. They had a 7-day well challenge to connect. It's old. It's been out for a couple of years, but I'm pretty sure it's still active. You can still find the information. So as you can see, I'm not going to go through all these in detail, but there's 7 different steps to connect. Taking stock, 8-minute phone call is really just quickly checking in with somebody. You don't have to spend a long time with somebody. Sometimes that happens. There's nothing wrong with that, but if there's somebody you want to really check in with, sometimes that they found is even an 8-minute call will do the trick. As I mentioned, chat up somebody you don't know, thank someone special, getting closer to a colleague. Maybe there's somebody that at work that you don't really know that well. You just, especially these days with virtual meetings, maybe reaching out to that person and having that 8-minute phone call. And getting a little more structured, maybe putting it on your calendar and keeping it going, setting goals. So those are all, again, guidelines that you can use. So at this point, I'm going to talk a little bit about compassion. That's so important in a lot of the work that we do. So again, I'm going to pause though and just see any questions, any thoughts about what I've put out there so far. Anybody want to make a comment at all? All right. So
Hi, Bud. Hi,
yes,
it's Denise. I'll make a comment.
thanks, Denise.
Yeah. So, I'm thinking about social connections and how you said it's very important. And where I work, I'm a social worker. So where I work, we have team meetings and it's virtual because social workers are all over North Haven, different areas.
Right.
And recently, a team member, a social worker, got promoted to a manager position, and we arranged to take her out to dinner. And that was an after work thing. And everyone was like, oh, I don't recognize you. Who are you? It was really nice. This is so nice. It was just different. So as you mentioned before, we were on Teams or Zoom and we see each other, but in person it's a little different. And our hair is let down. So we were smiling and laughing and giggling. And you don't do that on the team meeting. So it was good having that interaction in person.
Thank you, Denise, for that. That's such a good example of what I'm talking about. And we have to make that happen. And sometimes we get so busy it doesn't. So that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. Really does make a difference, doesn't it? And like you said, it lightens everything up and gets everybody feeling better. I think there was a chat. Let me just see. Pull that up. Oh, yes. The question is, would we get the slides? Yep. Um, I have a list of people who signed up on LMS, and I was going to send the slides and actually the recording to you afterwards. So if you're not on LMS, or if you didn't sign up through LMS, just put your name in the chat, and I'll make sure you get the slides. So this part, turning to compassion, just checking the time here. Okay. This is from the work of Tara Brock and Jack Cornfield. There were, leading mindfulness instructors that I listened to their work quite a bit. And what this first mirror neurons means is that neuroscience has revealed mirror neurons and other structures in the prefrontal cortex of the brain that make up what is sometimes referred to as our compassion circuitry. Interesting, right? I mean, there's an actual compassion circuitry in the brain. This enables us to perceive the emotions and even the intentions of others. But here's the kicker, and that's why I talked about the digital distractions and cell phones and so forth. When we're flooded with too much information and we're facing too many competing demands, and that probably sounds familiar to a lot of y'all, when we're anxious about our performance or otherwise stressed, or our compassion circuits can be blocked. And I think most of us have experienced this. We just don't have the time or the attention to feel connected and to reach out and to read what's going on with people. So this is where mindfulness-based compassion comes in. And so Numerous studies show that mindfulness practice directly engages the parts of our brains that are key to attuning to others' emotions. In other words, our empathy, right? And we're more able to recognize when someone is hurt or afraid or in need. And we're able to feel with them. Again, the empathy, that's the being able to actually put ourselves in their shoes. And that allows the tenderness of our compassion to arise. So, it's here. It's hardwired. It's pretty fascinating. But again, you all know that I think mindfulness helps with a lot of stuff. But the more I read about this, and I'll talk a little bit about a practice that you can do, and we'll do a couple before we close. But mindfulness really can help us be more attuned to someone else. So this is one of them, a loving kindness meditation, and we do have these. I'm not going to do a full one, but basically just to describe it quickly, a loving kindness meditation is simply about bringing to mind during a meditation someone that naturally you feel kindness and compassion for, somebody who you're close to. And it's sending them messages of care and compassion in your mind. You're doing this during the meditation. We'll do some of this in a minute, but I just kind of give you a description. And you're sending them messages like, may you be healthy, may you be happy, may you be safe, may you be free from suffering. Saying them, and they could be your own language. It doesn't have to be those. Those are kind of some of the classic ones. And then you include yourself. And the order is not so important either, but including yourself is important. We're going to talk about self-compassion, but making sure you include yourself in those messages. And then you might include somebody who's kind of neutral, somebody you don't really know that well, somebody that you maybe see at the Starbucks or, whatever that you come across, maybe even a neighbor who you don't know that well, but you see them in passing and you bring them to mind and you send them the same messages. And then you even proceed to somebody who's maybe somewhat difficult in your life, challenging, and you send them the same messages because, we all want to be happy and healthy. We all want those kinds of things. And then you can even extend that to circles beyond, to extending to all living beings, right? So that's a quick description of that. What I'm going to do is sort of a meditation that's based, it's actually, again, written and done by Tara Brach and Jack Kornfield. Let me just see. Let's do this. Back up. Let's do this now. Let's do this practice now. It'll bring some of this into. Hopefully, it'll help you understand how this works in practice. So, all you have to do is just follow along. It won't be too long. Let's see what time it is. We'll maybe do this in 5 or 6 minutes. So just find a way of sitting that allows you to be relaxed and alert. You can close your eyes if you find that helpful, but if you'd rather, you can also keep them open, maybe with a soft, unfocused gaze. In other words, be able to turn inward and take some moments to let go of any tension that you might feel, any tension, just allowing the body and the mind to settle and to be at ease. Bring your attention to the natural rhythm and quality of your breath. As the breath flows in, allow yourself to receive this life energy. And with the out breath, notice the sensations of letting go, of releasing into the space that surrounds you. You might even imagine your total body and consciousness flowing outward with the breath, mingling with the vastness of space. So breathing in and receiving, breathing out and letting go. Now invite into your awareness someone that you know personally, someone who's suffering, who's struggling, someone you want to help. And as you bring this person to mind, you might imagine yourself in their circumstances, experiencing their particular fears or hurts or their sense of loss. Notice what it's like to look at the world through these eyes, to live inside this particular body, and to feel with this heart. See if you can sense into what the most vulnerable, painful part of this person's experience is. What do they most need? And as you sense what's needed, breathe in, letting this person's pain touch your heart. Allow yourself to feel it gently with each in-breath, attending to and sensing this person's vulnerability. And as you breathe out, sense that you're releasing the suffering into a vast, caring presence. So you're breathing in and gently contacting the pain, breathing out and letting it go into the benevolence and love that fills the universe. Now, if it's difficult to feel this person's vulnerability, feel your own tender body, your throat or your chest or belly, and focus on softening. And if you find you have any resistance or difficulty finding compassion as you practice, hold this resistance too with compassion, breathing in and feeling touched by vulnerability, breathing out, offering your care and love, sensing how suffering is held in compassion. Now, enlarge the circle of your compassion to include all those who are in the same situation as this person. And you can also include folks in your circle of loved ones. And you might send them messages of loving kindness. May you be safe and healthy and happy. May you be free from suffering. May you live with ease. And include yourself in that as well. May we all be safe and healthy and happy. May we be free from suffering. May we live with ease. Just continue breathing a moment and just kind of notice what this all feels like, what your experience has been like in this practice. And as your heart opens to touch the suffering, you can become that openness as you offer your tenderness and your awareness with compassion. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes if they've been closed. And you can even do an abbreviated version of this compassion practice whenever you encounter someone at home or at work who's having difficulty. You could just, for several breaths, just silently breathing compassion for their pain. And with each in-breath, allowing yourself to sense it, their vulnerability. And with each out-breath, gently letting go into the larger space of love and presence. So you can practice that with just short little glimpses, okay? All right, well, curious to know if you want to give me any feedback, what that was like. Use the chat for that. I'm going to move along because we have going to try to close by about a few minutes before the hour, in case you do have something for 1 o'clock. Now we kind of turn to ourselves and being compassionate to ourselves and how we can, some of the barriers to compassion with others. And if you're very stressed out or burned out, this article, which is linked here, is all about that. But basically what it comes down to is that when we get into that situation, if it's ongoing high stress or burnout, research shows that social withdrawal is a key symptom. It sort of creates a vicious cycle. So we tend to withdraw. So that's always not very helpful. But it also impacts our family dynamics. So when we're burned out, we need our families the most, but recent studies show anxiety levels have jumped. And you probably already know this over the past couple of years. And this stress tsunami is flooding our homes. The emotional exhaustion makes it hard to be present. You're not loving your family any less, you're just running on empty. It's kind of an important distinction, right? And also it affects our friendships. And again, it's harder to reach out, as I mentioned before. We might have to almost, in a sense, force ourselves to do that. But burnout can impact friendships. And we tend to isolate, we tend to pull back, we tend to be more comfortable on the couch watching Netflix or something like that, when we really, it might be more helpful to be connecting with somebody. So for the last part, we're talking about self-compassion. Excuse me. So self-compassion equals self-kindness. And what I'm really talking about here is, how do you think about if you have a best friend or a close friend that's going through some struggles, what are the kinds of things that you say to them to support them? Not necessarily trying to fix their problem, but how do you support them in a caring, compassionate way? You might just think about your own language, but you might say things like, I'm here for you. Let me know if you want to talk. What do you need? How can I help you with that? What are some ways you can take care of yourself as you're going through this? Right? So you might do that naturally. Now ask yourself the question, if you're going through some struggles, what do you say to yourself? What the research shows, which is kind of scary in a way, is that we don't treat ourselves very kindly. We tend to be hard on ourselves. We tend to be critical of ourselves when we feel like we're not doing things right or we're not living up to our own expectations. Sometimes we even think that that self-critique is motivating. But it's actually, again, the research shows, Kristin Neff is one of the leading researchers in this, shows that being compassionate to ourselves is one of the most healthy and helpful things that we can do to getting through struggles and to helping with things like anxiety and stress. So here are the three elements. So again, this keeps popping up, of course, self-kindness. So warmth and understanding towards ourselves when we suffer or feel inadequate, rather than ignoring our pain with flagellating ourselves with self-criticism. So it's that trying to step back from that and maybe saying to yourself, what would I say to my best friend if they were going through that? What are the words I would use? What are the messages that I would give them? And then saying that to ourselves. So trying to bring that self-kindness back to us. Common humanity. So realizing that you're not the only one that's going through stuff. If you think about it, pretty much everybody goes through some form of suffering or difficulty or challenges in their lives. And probably with the billions of people on Earth here on this planet island that we have, there's probably somebody who goes through very, very similar things that you go through. That's why support groups work, right? People get together and they support each other because they really truly understand what the others are going through. So realizing though, saying to yourself, I'm not the only one, because sometimes we tend to feel like we are. Sometimes it feels like we're all alone in this struggle, but realizing that there are others who are experiencing the same kind of thing. And then the mindfulness and being aware of those self messages, being aware of when we're not being kind to ourselves, being aware of how that struggle shows up in the mind and the body is important. And actually, that's where we start with. We start with the mindfulness. So this is a quick exercise. So I'll run you through it quickly, and it's only take a few minutes, but this is something that you can carry forward. So this is a self-compassion mini break. So again, you might get comfortable, sense into the body, let the body relax a little bit, let the body settle and be supported by the chair. Be kind to the body. Take a couple of nice deep breaths. And simply be aware of or name the situation that you might be struggling with in your head. It doesn't have to be anything big, maybe something more mild or moderate, some situation that you might find challenging. And as you do this, just notice thoughts that come up. What are you saying to yourself? Notice feelings that are present. What emotion? And now we're not trying to fix any of this or change any of this right now. We're just noticing. And then what's going on in the body? So we know that there's a direct connection, mind and body. So maybe there's some tension. Maybe there's some stomach upset or something going on. Whatever it is, just notice, perhaps see if there's anything that you can sense in the body. Then take another deep breath. Maybe in the same way, breathing in that, being aware of that struggle, but breathing out, letting it go with the out breath. And say to yourself, others feel this way too. I'm not alone. Take another deep breath. And then finish with a statement. It could be your own words, but I will be kind to myself, or I'll take care of myself, or I will give myself what I need. What do you most need in the moment? Compassion, nurturing, support. What is it? And kind of making that intention to do that, which would be helpful for yourself. All right, and that's it. That's the practice. You can open your eyes if they've been closed, but so good. I've just noticed a comment here. Felt spiritual, so prayed for others. Great, excellent. I'm not sure if that was for the last practice or this one, but very good. I mean, it's a good example of you can use it in whatever way works for you. So it might be prayer. Prayer is a great way to kind of manifest it and bring it to others. So perfect. So all this kind of gets to making space for ourselves, which is again not hard to do. Giving ourselves permission to let go of the self-judgment for a few minutes, which we can sometimes be hard on ourselves, and approach our need with more compassion. And research shows, again, that when we practice this, we're more likely to feel less, I should say it this way, we're less likely to feel anxious and stressed, more likely to feel happy and resilience, and can even improve our physical health, as I mentioned before, heart rate, reduce inflammation, and improve sleep. So this is just to illustrate a connection practice. I don't really have an exact practice for this right now, but I like this image too. So kind of illustrates sort of everything we've been talking about. But you might make an intention in any of this to, what are a couple of takeaways for yourself that you might try to do to increase your sense of connection or compassion with somebody or yourself. Self-connection practice is important too. All right, so now this is something I might do if we were in person. It's kind of hard to do on a virtual call, but this is really a great exercise. And you might try this with somebody that a coworker perhaps, or somebody at home that you're close to. It's a simple mindful listening exercise. So it's just choose somebody. One person talks about anything really, about what you did last weekend or what you're planning to do this weekend, or something just relatively neutral. And for 2 minutes. And as that one person talks, the other person just listens. That's all. Don't say anything. Now, you can actively listen, like using your nonverbal facial expressions and body language, but just listen. You can't talk as you're listening. And you might notice what's going on. You might notice distractions. You might notice the impulse to want to interject. And that's normal, but I just want you to notice. And then you switch roles, and the other person listens and you talk. And just what was it like to really listen without being interrupted? I know this is sort of unnatural, but it's really an interesting way to kind of notice what's going on up here when we're listening, and also what's going on when we're talking, to really feel like we're really being heard and listened to. And as you can see from the quote, your attention is your highest form of love. So try that. If you get a chance, try that. This is a image, I like this one too. Sort of gives across the idea of similar to what we did in that first practice, but a little different. And it's, you breathe in for yourself. So on the in breath, you focus on what you need and what is helpful to you. Might be care, love, compassion, connection. And as you breathe in, you focus on that, whatever it is that nourishes you in the moment, sustains you. And you do that for a few cycles. And then as you breathe out and you keep in mind somebody that needs your support or your care or compassion. And you sort of send that out breath. You can even imagine it in the form of a light, for example, reaching out towards that person, a beam of light, sending with it, riding on that beam, that care and compassion. So it's a nice balance, because sometimes we find it's hard as caregivers, if you're a caregiver, to receive compassion, but it's important to give it to ourselves. So breathing in, you kind of give it to yourself and acknowledge yourself, and breathing out, you send it to someone in need. Okay, so you might want to try that too. Now, these are all on a page. I'll show you some resources, but I'll finish with this quote and then show you the resources. Meditation practice isn't about trying to throw ourselves away and become something stronger. It's about befriending who we already are. And so, again, I'll send these. I'm going to go over these quickly because we're just about out of time, but these are all brief little videos that talk about a lot of the stuff that I've been mentioning. The last two here are really good, actually. Just point these out: The Sacred Art of Listening, and then Deep Listening. This is only 3 minutes. He talks about training nurses to listen with their head, their heart, and their body. There is an app that you can try which has a lot of similar stuff on it. There's one, they even have an on-demand a little class, 3 episodes on cultivating compassion on this app. We are doing a couple more workshops. I do a monthly mindfulness workshop on the second Wednesday of every month. We've got a 4-week class coming up in March into April. Relax, focus, de-stress, and connect, all on LMS. And then we still do the phone meditations 5 days a week. Oh, I repeated that one. Sorry about that. That's the app again. And there's other resources we have. This is the link on our EFR website that has over 25 guided meditations. There's other apps that you can use. I've listed a few here. And then I post all this stuff on YouTube. That's where you'll get the link from. And then a slide on Employee and Family Resources, just a reminder about their services. And then on other well-being offerings. This is all listed on Thrive, which is on the intranet. But we do have health coaching coming up, so stay tuned for that. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that's under that umbrella. Here's where you find Thrive. Departments of Communities, go to T, click on Thrive, and you'll come up with that. So I appreciate that. I'm going to thank you also for taking the time to join me. And namaste and peace be with you. And thanks so much for your kind attention. And remember to be kind to yourselves. And thank you for all the good work that you do. And, I'll be on for a couple of minutes more if you have any more questions. But I know you probably have, many of you have to get to places or to other meetings. But so I'll stop the recording. Say thanks again.